Over 1,000 Beatings, Spiritual Sanity, and the Rejection of Evil by Neely, Chapter 9. When I was 10 years old in the 5th grade, I began following an unknown inclination inside me. It was a seeking of a higher truth that became part of a living soul. It was an act both of inner creation and of inner being, a spiritual sanity in the shape and form of the rejection of evil. I did not have these words at such a young age. Act then. Maybe it meant back then, I don't know. But that is what I felt and experienced within. Sometimes when I was confronted by my father and in response to what no one and in response to what he would demand of me or order me to do, I would say no or be silent. Standing still, not moving. If it wasn't a sudden attack or an ambush, I would look him in the eye as he would begin to glare at me. There was no weeping. I was stoic. Though he was my father, a part of me, perhaps a living soul within, saw him as an evildoer. I was an innocent. That was the extent of my defiance and protest that I could and did make before he would begin to curse me, and I would crumble within, hurling myself to the floor, screaming, crying, flopping around like a fish out of water. I am so thankful for Keith's friendship. He understood what was being done to me. He loathed my father. He held him in contempt. He gifted me with an ironic sense of humor about God, the masses, and the struggling to make a go out of life. It helped me transcend the wickedness of my father. I wasn't aware of it, but for me, it was an act of being through the rejection of his evil. Keith would pick me up in the evening at my house in his car. Then we would drive around drinking and being half lit, carousing about town. We went to dance places on the weekend and on the weekdays to the bars or to the parking lots of fast food restaurants to see who else was up and about town as we were. He was the best of a friend for the worst of times for me. When I drank alcohol, it loosened or relaxed my vocal cords. I would be able to talk, but as the drinking for the evening progressed, like any other inebriated person, my speech would become slurred and wouldn't be understandable. However, when the gift of speech occurred, when I began to drink at the age of 15, I felt it was miraculous to be able to speak without something blocking me from talking and from making me an object of ridicule and laughter before others was tremendous. After the first couple of drinks, I would feel a flood of emotion and a physical warmth inside me. It was wonderful. It was a good feeling to be with people and to feel relaxed and gregarious. With a few drinks inside me, I could experience friendship and acquaintanceship in a positive way. I truly felt a warmth of spirit from within, a sense of earnestness, a desire to be a part of the world and humanity. Though these feelings and sentiments may sound either crazy or totally false to some, nevertheless this was what I felt and beheld within. This may be why, when I drink, that I only wanted to be around other people who were drinking. I remember the saying that water seeks its own level. I was a young guy, 16 years of age, who was never touched physically in an affectionate way by his mother, nor were any verbal endearments ever addressed or given to me by her. The inner landscape of my spirit without alcohol was dim and lifeless. When I was in the 9th or 10th grade, my father began right before he left for work to come over to my mother and softly kiss her on the lips. As I have said, my father went to church every Sunday with his Bible in hand. Surely one could and should give this man the benefit of the doubt in his attempt at raising his eldest son. Wasn't he of an ilk that was just trying to do the best that he could with what he had? This is what I asked myself. No, he wasn't doing the best that he could, and he was never even trying. For whatever reasons known only to him, he chose to treat me in the most abhorrent ways possible. It didn't even occur to me that forbidding my mother to either touch me or address any verbal affection towards me would be one of the most cruel and crippling ways imaginable to treat and raise a child. What I did think about was all the violent, frenzied spankings from the age of 4 on up to 8, and then the beatings with the open-handed slap to the side of the face and head. I thought of all the obscenities he called me from the earliest age on up to the present day. I thought of the hatred he spewed forth at me. There was never any escape from him. He lived in a prison, and he was my torturer. I lived in a prison, and he was my torturer. I was not guilty of anything except being a child and being vulnerable. What I knew was the physical pain, terror, shame, and humiliation that he not haphazardly but deliberately inflicted upon me every single time he beat me. From the age of 4 on up, I felt I was living in the belly of a beast, someone who was devouring me and who was plundering my soul of everything and leaving nothing of worth or of value behind. I didn't have any outs. On physical, emotional, and mental levels, I lived in a constant state of being numb and frozen. It was like I was forever paralyzed with fear and suspicion when he was in the same room with me. I was an avowed atheist at age 16. I did not believe in God or in organized religion. On a spiritual level, I held on to two things to be defiant of my father in the innermost part of my being. I didn't respond, or I said no to any demand or order that he told me to do. The second was I never physically assaulted or beat any of my brothers. I did not do to any one of them what was being done to me. In spite of my physical cowardice and being weak, I knew consciously that as a human being, there was a part of me that was of value in a way of a higher good. I remember visiting one of my cousins, Joanne. She was 2 years younger than me. My family went into their house, and my father was immediately all smiles, laughs, and good-natured in his greeting of the cousins and their parents. After maybe 20 minutes, Joanne asked me if I wanted to take a walk. I said okay. We left her house and walked a short distance to a park. We ended up sitting on one of the park benches. Joanne turned to me. She said, "I really wish I had your father as my dad. Mine is mean, unfair, and very strict." I almost fell off the bench. She continued, "Your dad is so nice. He is always laughing. He is really fun to be around." I was dumbfounded. When I found my voice, I said, "He isn't like that at all. He is two-faced. If you really knew him, you wouldn't want to be around him. He wouldn't treat you well." She said, "Really? That's hard to believe." I laughed. "You can believe it. That is the way he is." We both smiled at the irony and the way that my father presented himself to people who didn't know him, and the way he really was when he was back home alone with his family. On the drive back across town with my family, I fell into deep thought about my father's behavior when he was with any of the other girl relatives. With my female cousins, he was always jovial and good-natured. I thought he was deceitful to the extreme. He was truly two-faced. All of the sentiments to describe him, good-natured, jovial, and fun to be around, would be at the very bottom of my list. When my brother Jim, who at the time was 13 and 4 years younger than me, pushed back verbally at me, I took off running at him. He was enraged. He ran out of the kitchen door with me chasing behind. I wanted to catch him, to get a hold of him, so I could physically pound him senseless. He flew down the driveway and across the street. With me close behind, I closed the gap. Only 2 more steps, and I would have seized him. I heard an emphatic, deep voice inside my head. Let him go, let him go. I stopped. My brother continued running alongside the neighbor's house into their backyard. I walked back to the inside of my house. I was glad I had stopped and let my brother escape. I thought of my mother and my father's relationship with her. They would argue loudly at times, but he never once cursed or hit her. Outwardly, he treated her with respect. What she gave him in return was me. She began to demonize me when I was in the 6th grade and to try at times to actually beat me up herself. She would rage at me. The word she began to use more and more often to describe me was evil. My father gained the use of this word to use against me from her. Both would begin their cursing, saying, "Goddamn kid," "Jesus crackers," and then "snot-nosed kid," "young should've," "young hoodlum." Each of them worked themselves up into a fury before and while assaulting me. Entering the 12th grade, I was still naive regarding how my sexuality worked below my belt. At times my father would attack me physically without warning. Sometimes he would mutter something indistinguishable to me and then suddenly start slapping and hitting me, knocking me to the floor. It took me long enough, but I finally caught on that he was examining the front of my trousers to see if there was an erection there or a beginning of one before he would start hitting me. My mother had become very open to me in her contempt and derision towards me. In her own opinion, I was getting what I asked for from my father. My smoking cigarettes really set her off to shrieking obscenities at me about how sickening and what a devil kid I was. I would laugh at her and I began to tell her that I hated her, to let her know that everything wasn't okay with me regarding what my father was doing to me and her just standing there doing nothing. As the school year unfolded I came home either at lunch break or after school, I would seek her out in the house. I would stand before her. I would say in a calm, unruffled voice, "I hate you. I hate you. I hate you." I would continue for as many times as it took to provoke her into a rage, for her to begin to attack me physically. She would then try to hit me with her slaps, and I would block them with the inside of my arms until she would tire out. At times I would come home from school, and as soon as I told her that I hated her, she would run over to the corner of the kitchen where she kept her kitchen mop. It was always dirty and soggy. I am guessing that was for my sake. She would stand before me like a Joan of Arc holding the wooden handle of the mop like it was a spear or sword. She would then jab the soggy mop at me, trying to hit my face. I stopped her jabs with the palms of my hands, pushing the mop head away from me. Often any of my three younger brothers would be there. I do not know what any of one of them thought back then. My father kept beating me once a week. I am guessing that my mother told him of my misbehavior towards her. When there was no one in the house but my father and me, he would ambush me, knocking me to the floor, already in a full-blown rage. I would be lying on the floor. He would kneel down and straddle my chest, pinning my arms to the floor with his knees. He would begin slapping the side of my face and head, all the while cursing me. He kept going on and on, hitting me openly, laughing at me, and mocking me. When he finally stopped, it was to take a short break and to get his wind back, all the while keeping his knees planted on my arms, still pinning them to the floor. He started over again, slapping me. He kept laughing at me, taunting and calling me one obscenity after the other. He would run his hand like a crab over my face, pinching my nostrils, shout with his thumb and forefinger, along with cupping my chin with the palm of his hand. He would push upwards to try and close my mouth to prevent me from screaming and breathing. All the while he would be cackling at me, shortling sounds of mirth and glee. When he was finished, I was broken again. In the eyes of my mother, I was to blame for telling her that I hated her, thereby provoking him. I didn't care. My disrespect and misbehavior towards her didn't change. I saw her as my father's property. He owned her lock, stock, and barrel. I knew my father only as someone who beat and hurt me whenever he could, and who took pleasure and delight from doing so. The atheism that I experienced back then was not something that I self-willed. It was what I experienced. It was just there within me. It was my reality. My mind might have collapsed inwardly and imploded from what I was experiencing from my father. It didn't. I had no words back then to describe it to anyone what was going on inside me and why I didn't end up as being some sort of madman or end up in a mental hospital being catatonic, devoid and empty of life and spirit. But today I do have the words. Back then I kept turning inwards, and what I found was a faith in a higher good from following a presence within. It was an inner emphatic voice at the age of 6 that commanded me not to do to others what was being done to me. The spiritual sanity that I experienced was the rejection of evil by not doing anything that my father demanded. The way I felt this spiritual sanity was as an inner strength and inspiration. A lasting presence was within me as I was struggling to persevere and reject the evil that my father was attempting to perpetrate upon me. I was in a war of over 1,000 battles, and that lasted 14 years from the age of 4 on up until 18. I lost every single battle, yet I won the war. Though I was not much consciously aware of doing so, an inner attempt was being made to keep alive a sacred unknown that was within me, and to have a faith to sustain its being and light throughout my ordeal. I did not forsake a living soul that was within me, and my atheism, was I blind and deaf to a higher inner truth? I believed that, through no fault of my own, with the passing of time in my household, I became a lost soul, yet a soul that was not beyond redemption and was worth saving. Worth saving. My present day, being a detective trying to solve a mystery of being in a way of light and spirit, to experience a spiritual sanity to help me in living my life, to continually remind myself to make a willful effort at being within through an act of inner creation, one of a spontaneity of feeling spirit and light. My conscious decision today is to not self-destruct or sabotage my innermost thoughts and being. For today to make my life worthwhile and meaningful to live following along a path of inner light and being. I have a choice. I have to block out the emotional shame and trauma of my past before I fall into a hopeless realm of despair and depression, and then begin saying to myself that I wish I was dead, over and over. Your irreparable damage was done to me. I tell myself to not die inwardly. Practice a willingness to be alive, to breathe in the breath of life as a warmth of feeling, a liveliness to spark an inner light of being. I can alleviate past shame, pain, and humility by feeling more acutely for many other human beings that have suffered at the hands of another. I remember Carol from over 30 years ago who got married to a guy who repeatedly beat and raped her in front of her young son, who was 2 and 3 at the time. An empty life adrift upon a sea of fantasy. A silent struggle to be alive, if only for a trice in time to spark the light within, to illuminate hidden shadows of fright and despair. There you are, as pretty as the bloom of the bright, soft, vibrant color of a flower, a loveliness to enchant, a phenomenon of brightness and beauty to behold, a woman to adore. When I think of her and her son, I wish them all of the warmth and wellness that I can bring forth to feel. I weep thinking of her and her son. I thank I thank her for letting me make her friendship and acquaintance. At the very least, I can make choices that I can use to aspire towards noble ideals. I can choose sincerity and being conscientious over being deceitful and lying. I can choose hope over despair and depression, faith and optimism over cynicism and bitterness, inner courage over being fearful and or traumatized, being honorable over a lack of integrity, willingness over complacency or mental laziness. I can work on being worthy of another's friendship instead of being a helpless victim. I must find an endeavor from which I can express light and an appreciation of another's inner beauty. To concentrate on the good inside me to better feel and care for another. Healing will be hopeless if I begin to hate and condemn myself for my failures in life. I want to try to be an explorer, discovering an unseen light to illuminate hidden truths beyond my intuition, to encourage me to live. The outer limits of my imagination are opportunities for new beginnings. If I feel the brokenness of spirit inside me, then I want to use that awareness to feel for the many others on this planet who have not been as fortunate as I have in experiencing physical, mental, and spiritual health. Sometimes in the journey of today, a healing can begin from within the depths of despair. Whatever today may bring, I will not give up hope for a brighter tomorrow. I will use spiritual nonviolence to combat eruptions of hatred, spite, or obscenity that may occur inside me. These intoxicants are not acceptable. in the inner life I have chosen to attempt to reflect outwardly to others. I will hold true to an inner commitment not to let myself be violently insane either inwardly or outwardly, to aspire towards a noble ideal of gentleness and kindness, to pursue friendship and acquaintanceship with others. I will try not to imprison myself in an empty world of lethargy and hopelessness, to make a willful effort to try to spark a light within to come into being. I was not surrender I must not surrender to either rage or hate. They are hostile to a living soul. They will take me away from thoughts of people who have shared care, inspiration, and concern towards me at various times in my life. Their friendship and intent of goodwill and good cheer towards me gave me hope and inspiration where before there had been very little in me. There is a yearning within me that longs for an intimacy of light, warmth, and spirit with my fellow man and woman. I must work on fulfilling an inner commitment to put body and soul into wanting to be alive. Spiritual nonviolence helps me not to abandon or lose awareness of a living soul that resides within me. I want to hold on to what is within me for dear life. I have been fortunate to have come back from the depths of the abyss into light and being, just to be by making an earnest attempt. That is what is most important. Not to cast myself adrift upon a sea of solitude, to be with other people and to attempt to share light and inner life. I feel one of the biggest positives I have gained from an inner life is empathy for others. I can practice an art of inner creation by being willing and open to relate to another's emotions, thoughts, or feelings. Spiritual sanity has given me a new beginning as an explorer. I have discovered that weeping because of another's emotional pain and distress from evil perpetrated upon them by another is an expression of inner strength and kinship. I have experienced that seeking to be inspired by inner light and spirit is more real and authentic than anything else that I could possibly imagine and aspire towards for this day and time. I have to finish reading this last page, this last half page. I'll call you right back. A voyage of hope and healing upon a dark plum sea of raspberry rose dreams, an amber mist of golden crystal to alight my spirit with a bright cheer of periwinkle blue, glistening rainbow flecks of winter ice, and a cherry pink twilight where hidden shadows of dreams and imaginings disguise a yearning for romantic love, a twinkling orange sunburst of starlight to kindle a spark, a passion, a spontaneity of thought and feeling. If only one moment to be, if only one risk to share warmth and vulnerability. Thanks for watching, thanks for working, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening, day, morning, whatever have you, and week, and next week, and your whole life. Okay, thank you, bye.